It's the story of a man and woman who meet each other and then fight hard together to sort of survive. Well, it's a great love story, the story of my parents. Having come to Toronto with nothing, literally with the clothes on their back, build a life together, take care of their 3 children. And 20 years later, they were able to find this piece of property that is now going to be this Center for the Arts. I think it's a fitting legacy to them in the city of Toronto.
This is the TIFF Bell Lightbox. It's designed to be the center of film culture in Canada. It used to be a car wash owned by Leslie and Clara Reitman. They were Eastern European immigrants who risked their lives to come to Canada. And in their memory, this piece of land in downtown Toronto has been donated to the TIFF Bell Lightbox.
And it seemed like a perfect opportunity when the Toronto Film Festival organization was looking for a new home.
Our mother was artistic, our family was artistic, and of course Ivan is part of the film industry. And so it just resonated in every possible way.
This place will celebrate freedom, the depiction of the human condition in all its variety, and it's so fitting for 2 people who fought so hard to be able to live freely.
Like most great stories, this one is all about love. It starts on May 6, 1937. Leslie Reitman, a young Jewish man from Czechoslovakia, noticed Clara Robb, a Jewish girl living just across the border in Hungary.
Our father first laid eyes on our mother when he was in the army and stationed in Kilmarnock.
He was captivated, and it really was love at first sight.
But the feeling wasn't necessarily mutual.
The second time we met, I was very cool, and I said, I'm too young, I'm not interested to go yet. And he said, you know, I'm not just going with you, I want to marry you. I want to marry you. That's what he said.
He knew he would win her over eventually. He was charismatic, and he was, very confident.
He had to learn Hungarian just to speak to her, to court her. This is the kind of person he would like to settle down with for the rest of his life.
But before they could marry, Leslie faced a greater challenge. In 1939, Hitler's troops invaded Czechoslovakia. The border with Hungary was closed, and for the next 6 years, Leslie was forced in and out of hiding.
You know, my father was just a remarkably courageous man.
He would bribe whoever he had to get over that border and see Clara.
He fought in the underground. He passed information. He would tell us that he escaped death 7 times.
One of those times was in 1944, after the Germans had invaded Hungary. Leslie was caught living under a false identity in Budapest and thrown in prison.
It was a camp that made uniforms for the Nazi guards. And so he became a presser, and as such, he was able to not only press, but he had to deliver these uniforms outside the camp.
Leslie sent word to his brother Imre on where he was and waited for an escape plan to reveal itself. And somehow, one day, Leslie noticed the key to the front door of the camp was hanging on a hook unsupervised. He quickly snatched it and grabbed a bar of soap.
And he was able to take that key and embed it in the bar of soap so that it imprinted in the bar of soap.
The next time he was out on a delivery, Leslie sent the soap to his brother, who made a key from it and smuggled it back into the camp.
And from that, he was able to escape with a number of people who he left the door open for.
Leslie raced back to Clara in Kilmarnock. They worked and hid with her family on a farm, but their time was limited because in the fall of 1944, the Germans started rounding up all the Jews. Leslie pleaded with Clara to escape with them, but her mother insisted that the Robb family stay together.
You never divided a family, you always stayed together. And so she decided that she would go with her family.
It was a terrible decision.
Clara and her family were forced onto a train to Auschwitz.
Her mother suffered terrible guilt and grief in the cattle cars. She just couldn't forgive herself.
Clara and her sister Lily struggled to stay alive in Auschwitz. Her mother, father, her sister Olga, and her son would not survive. In the winter of 1945, the war was coming to an end, but Clara and Lily's nightmare was far from over. The sisters were led on a death march into the Polish countryside until they collapsed.
And they were just ready for the Nazi guard to shoot them dead. But for whatever reason, he just let them be, and he continued on the march.
She was finally free, and she had one thought on her mind.
She just wanted to find Leslie, her love.
Back in Komarno, Leslie clung to the hope that Clara was alive.
Each transport I waited when I watched and asked questions. And I just couldn't find out about Clara. When I was just ready to go, and suddenly I turned back, and there behind me was. You can imagine how emotional thing it was.
Their families had been ripped apart. Their lives had been on hold for 8 years, so they wasted no time and were married a week after Clara's return. Ivan was born a year later. Leslie built up a prosperous vinegar and plum brandy business. The family was finally able to live peacefully. Until 1948, when the communists took power. Leslie was threatened with jail time if he refused to manage all of the country's vinegar and alcohol producing factories. It felt like the Nazis all over again. So Clara made an executive decision to flee the country and engineered their escape.
My parents were explaining that they were taking all the most important things and leaving.
They snuck through town to a tugboat that was headed for Vienna. The captain hid them underneath the floorboards. Then they waited over 24 hours for the communist authorities to inspect and clear the boat for departure.
My parents had fed me a number of sleeping pills to make sure that I would sleep through this whole ordeal and to make sure that I wouldn't make any noise or start crying just at the worst possible time.
Eventually, the boat was allowed to leave. Clara lit a candle to check on Ivan.
I was sort of out cold with my mouth open and my eyes open, as if I had died during that night of darkness that they had to spend. And she was terrified that somehow she had killed me.
Soon after, the family faced another huge scare. Vienna was split into zones, and the boat was required to port with the communists on the Russian side.
My father freaked out, and he got into a whole fight with the tugboat owner as if it was his fault.
Leslie and the captain fought until a plan was hatched.
The captain was going to smuggle us from the boat onto land, and it had to do with dressing us up as peasants from Bulgaria, which actually seemed to have worked out because we got in. They caught a taxi on the Russian side and took us right over to the American side.
No one in Vienna believed they'd escaped from Czechoslovakia. That just didn't happen. But from there, they went to France and eventually Canada.
I never been so happy in my life than when we came to Canada. And I never was so poor in my life either. Nothing could encourage us. That was when we born again.
The Reitman settled in Toronto and struggled to make ends meet. Leslie dreamed of restarting his vinegar company but was shut out by the domestic monopoly. He worked hard labor factory jobs while trying to support the family that now included the twins, Aggie and Susan. He went into debt to buy a dry cleaners, ironically the trade the Nazis had taught him back in Budapest. That became the family business.
Years later, he would tell us, everything you do comes good. Even if you don't realize it's good, eventually it comes good.
They worked very hard in the business. Dad, in the early days, he pressed, he drove the truck, and Mom, of course, did all the alterations and served mostly at the front counter. They really had a vision of building a better life for his children.
Regardless of how little our family had financially, as children, we never felt it.
Despite working 6 days a week, she created this wonderful, comfortable life for us. I mean, from our clothing to our decor, to the furnishings, to our meals, everything was just lovely. They had a very extensive group of friends, most of them survivors as well, many from Komarno. That became their community. I think wealth, when you've lost everything twice, is not judged in material terms. For them, wealth was in being healthy and in being free to live the way they wanted to. It was freedom of religion. It was freedom to go where you wanted to go and be what you wanted to be. Through it all, they had this incredible romantic bond.
Leslie and Clara's years of hard work had paid off. Their business assets now included lucrative real estate around the city. It was the perfect time to slow down. But when Leslie heard that a car wash in downtown Toronto was for sale, he just knew he had to buy it.
We were all stunned, really. We had trouble picturing him in a car wash.
Was really on the outskirts of everything, and it just felt like a kind of mediocre piece of the city. But he said, the city's going to grow up around here. This is going to be the center of creativity for the city of Toronto. It was almost like a vision.
The kids grew up and started their own families. Susan got into music, Aggie into community work, and Ivan decided to make films.
I think my mother came from a very creative family. My father came from a very pragmatic family. And you know, somehow to be in the film business, you need a combination of artistry and pragmatism.
Leslie and Clara were finally able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. And because of that sound investment at the corner of King and John Street, Toronto has a new home for film, the TIFF Bell Lightbox.
What's lovely about this story is it is a reminder to us all about what we're capable of, no matter what we experience in our life. And I guess that's what I'll try to remember when I walk into the Bell Lightbox for the first time.
I think it really fulfills his vision of what he was hoping for when he bought the car wash.
This was never ours to give. I always believed that it was their gift to give, and we were just the mediator in that. And they would have been just so thrilled with all of this because it just resonated so well.
For us to do this is a way to really satisfy that vision and to help really lead it to where he saw it.
From nothing, they created magic. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. They only looked forward. They never looked back.
I just wanted peace and freedom and love. That's the thing we should have always.